there's nothing more frightening to George than almost having his buffer zone widen out where he can completely, be away from his parents. There's nothing like the bad news of that happening. And like Jerry in the last episode, with his own apartment almost having his parents in there all the time, George is stuck with not just his mother, but an inanimate object in his bed that looks like his mother. What is that inanimate object? Let's talk about this episode called The Doll. A lot of the stories happen in the Doll episode. We start off, of course, with Jerry was out of town in Memphis doing a show. And I guess Susan's old college roommate, Sally Weaver, played by Kathy Griffin, very loudmouth comedian, who also was in an episode of Law & Order SVU as Babs Duffy. Maybe we'll talk about that someday, who knows. But she's come back to see Jerry, and Jerry thinks she is like kooky and whatnot. But she was there to give Jerry this gift that for George and Susan, it was a early wedding present. But she tells Jerry, do not make sure to we handle it very care. It's very fragile. Basically, it was a breakable item, basically. So Jerry, of course, had to carry his bag and the present on the plane. It took up a lot of space, and he had no open seat next to him. So the flight attendant had to make him put one of the bags, either the present or his bag, up in the thing above. Which, of course, he ended up giving his bag. But when they slided his bag in there, he hears something break. And while I was in Memphis, he got this barbecue sauce that had this guy on it who looked like Charles Grodin, or whatever the heck his name was. And he was doing an upcoming show in a few days where he was going to do a bid on Charles Grodin, on Charles Grodin, and how he looked like him on this bottle of barbecue sauce. Well, he gets back to New York, and sure enough, that breakage he heard was in fact the jar of barbecue sauce, and it got all over everything on his and it was in his bag. Of course, Kramer's trying to salvage, any of the barbecue sauce he can in the meantime. George, though, meanwhile, earlier on in the episode, he was out to lunch with his father. Of course, then Elaine's there, and then she tries to avoid a sit with Mr. Costanza, but instead ends up sitting with him and starts talking about this photograph. So Elaine, of course, had been recently dating the Maestro, which, how long was it back? I think it was just earlier, back in the first disc, I believe it was, where we had the Maestro episode. And I guess things didn't work out because I guess while they were in Tuscany, she accidentally spilled a bottle of wine all over his 8x10 autograph photo of the three tenors. But then Elaine was saying while there, she saw this photo of this house, this place in Tuscany called Costanza's, and there's a guy sitting right outside there who looks exactly a lot like Frank Costanza. And Frank wants to get hold of this photo because he's wondering if it's his cousin Carlo, who was the only Costanza whenever they came to America that did not come with them. He stayed behind. So he's wondering if it in fact is Carlo. So he wants to find some way to get that photo. So he also tells George while he's there that, since we're not moving to Del Boca Vista, he wants to know if he can turn George's bedroom into a billiard parlor. To which he does, and sets up a pool table in there. George, of course, also tells, while he was over at Jerry's, well, first off, he then tells Kramer about it. Kramer decides to go over and play some pool with Frank Costanza, which, of course, they have a hard time trying to get past the first game because the room is, tight and not really meant for, a pool table, as nothing was going in and hadn't even finished the first game after 3 hours. But, of course, Frank and Kramer were getting ready to go see the Maestro to see, of course, who was a good friend of Kramer's, to see, again, it was Bob Cobb, to see if there's any way they can get his hands on that photo, because Frank Costanza wants to see if it's Carlo or not. Of course, Estelle's telling him, no, it's not. No, it's not. So then, meanwhile, though, back at Jerry's, George opens a present from Sally, and it was not a breakable item. It was a doormat, an ugly-looking doormat that said the Costanzas on it. Of course, Jerry is pissed now. You're more pissed at Sally because she made him. She said that was in the package was fragile when it's just a doormat. So his jar of barbecue sauce for his bid got broke, and everybody said, "Why don't you just do something else?" He goes, "I'm out of material." And of course, he doesn't come up with some newer stuff. So then he's not sure what to do. Of course, Kramer tries to talk to him, doing some bit on styrofoam, and he does not like that at all whatsoever. But then, of course, George goes back to his apartment to where Susan's moving more of her stuff in. He walks into the back room, and as she's telling him about that, she has a doll collection she set up. And George is just standing there like startled. And Susan's like, "What?" There was a doll, one of Susan's dolls, ended up being one of Susan's favorite dolls, that looks exactly like Estelle Costanza. And George is just freaked out by it big time. And I mean really, really freaked out. So then they're in bed later at night. They were making out, probably getting ready to, fool around or whatnot. And then George looks over his shoulder, realizes the doll is laying right there. And of course, Susan's saying that George is crazy, thinking that doll looks exactly like his mother. But Susan's also like, "But I always liked to sleep with my dolls when I was a little girl." And then George he couldn't do it. He didn't sleep well at all that night. And he's freaked out because basically he felt like he was in bed with his own mother. So yeah, it's like he wanted a bigger buffer zone in the last episode. But not only did they not move to Florida, now he has a doll, an inanimate object that looks exactly like his mother, in bed with him and his fiance. How freaky is that? Very freaky, of course. But of course, and then of course, Frank Costanza and Kramer were trying to see the maestro, who was getting ready to do a concert. He wasn't home. He left those photos at home. So they offered to say, "Well, if you get the photo for us, we'll treat you to a game of pool at Frank's Billiard," which of course they again had issues trying to play. Of course, then they also learned a trick from the maestro, that whenever he's not wearing, he has his nicer pants, whenever he has nice pants on, he takes them off and just walks on his underwear, because of how he folds them, it saves the crease in the pants. And of course, there's a callback also to what episode was it now with the bros with the bro in the man's ear from the last season it was. But anyways, there's a throwback to the maestro, who was just just getting in the mood with it. He played a song, he's getting in the mood for his symphony later on. He waved around the baton, and then Kramer's trying to help Frank, and of course Estelle walks into another awkward position. She's just like, "Oh my God," just like it was whenever they walked in on Kramer and Frank, like awkwardly dancing, like doing jigaboo and whatnot, whenever they're trying to try on the bro or the man's ear. It was just, just another awkward moment, of course, which of course Estelle was freaked out by. Of course, though, Jerry then finds out that Sally's coming up for a visit. So, now she's coming up, of course. First off, George wants to get that welcome mat he gave to his parents. He wants to get it from them. That way it's out. That way Sally doesn't know they gave it away. So then he has George ask her if she could bring him the thing with that barbecue sauce, which she comes up, but she doesn't grab the wrong kind. But she's like, "No, you want that sauce. You want this sauce." But it's like, it's not the whole point. He wanted to say because not for the sauce, but for the guy on the bottle looking like the guy that he was going to be doing his bid on, his material on at the upcoming show he was working. So now he's screwed there. And of course, the doll continues to freak everybody out. George took that doll everywhere with him. And, he'd be sitting there eating at the shop, at the coffee shop, and he'd be thinking his mom was talking to him and whatnot, which she's not, but it's just the doll just sitting there staring at him. It was just freaking him out big time. But then, of course, also, again, back to Elaine's story, she found a way to make up to the maestro. Jerry was going to be on a show with the three tenors, so she wanted to get an autograph from the three tenors. So, one of the members of the three tenors, which was the other guy, until it realized later is Caravis, or heck the guy's name was. So, of course, Elaine came to get that, and while she was there, Jerry earlier in the episode was bragging about this toothbrush called Oradent or something like that. He got Elaine Oradent. Came in a big package, so she had a hard time carrying it with the signed poster from Caravis, or whatever his name was, the other guy from the three tenors. And she took it back to the maestro, who earlier when he walked out of the room to get some air, while playing pool, Kramer had used his baton, which was much smaller, as a pool stick, which that ruined his stick. He didn't realize that until the actual symphony, and he was trying to waving it, and it was all bent and whatnot. And Elaine, of course, had came by to give him that autograph poster of the three tenors, which he was happy about, so they'll go out and celebrate afterwards. But of course, the Oradent box then bumped the wine that was on his desk conveniently and spilled right back on the new poster again. So bad luck there. Then Jerry has an idea it was pitched to him about why doesn't he use a picture of George's mom and George's doll as part of his act. So he calls George's apartment to have George get the doll, but instead Sally answers, and Sally says she'll bring the doll. Of course, she brings a totally different doll, which she thought it looked better, which of course just makes Jerry so mad he basically has nothing for a show. Then worse off, he then also heard about the maestro and his thing about taking his pants off and folding it when he's not really using them to save the crease. And the other guy used them by mistake to wipe some sauce off of it. So Jerry basically didn't have a bad pair of pants, and he had no material for a show. But meanwhile, though, Frank had then got a hold of the photo, and he was pretty sure that in fact this is cousin Carlo. And of course he runs to George's apartment to tell him, and of course he then looks at the doll, and again he's thinking that she's talking to him also. And of course Frank rips the doll out of Susan's hands and rips its head off. Then he travels out to Tuscany to go to Costanza's, but it's not his cousin Carlo, it's some guy named Giuseppe. So all that for nothing, unfortunately, for Mr. Frank Costanza. And he does not find his cousin Carlo. And that's the doll episode. Again, very, very funny, very goofy episode. Jerry with the bad luck with Sally Weaver, which not the last time we see Sally Weaver. She does appear again in a later episode in season 9. But yeah, just it's funny again how in the previous episode we had George trying to get a big buffer zone. He had the buffer zone, then it came back further and further and further to the point where, they're still in New York. Now my fiance has a doll that looks like my mother, and now that doll is in bed with us. So yeah, he couldn't escape from getting further and further away from his parents, especially his own mother. So yeah. That's the doll episode, guys. But then, of course, we have the next episode, which... Wait, first off, is there any trivia? Not really. Yeah. Actually, they were originally going to call this episode The Doormat, but then they thought that the doll kind of, overpowered more of the episodes, so they decided to call it. But yeah, the three tenors were... Placido Domingo, Luciano Pavarotti, and then Jose Carreras was the third guy, aka the other guy. Also, Dina, who was back in the Gum episode, saw George with the doll at Monk's, and again questioned how crazy he was, of course, and whatnot. So yeah, that's that, and that's the doll episode. The next episode, the Friars Club, that's probably another one of my personal favorites. Mainly because, I mean, all the stories were pretty good, but especially one I just thought was, like, very fitting for Kramer, and just, I thought it was pretty hysterical. But we'll talk about that episode next, the Friars Club. There's quite a bit to talk about that episode. So, guys, what's your thought on the doll episode? Do you, of course, completely agree that the doll looked exactly like Estelle Costanza? Or do you not agree? Make sure to leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And be sure, as always, to slap a like on the video, subscribe, got a sneeze, for more content to come on the channel, and follow me on Twitter as well, at DemandAirboy93. Until then, guys, I am checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your night, and I'll see you guys in the next video, which is, we talk about the Friars Club episode. We are almost done also with Season 7. So until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your night, and peace out, everybody.